here today, at least in this capacity, because I'm here a lot, but not in this capacity. As the introduction said, from 1972 to 1975, I attended Holmes. Back then it was called Theological Seminary. Now they've changed the name. It's Holmes Bible College. It's in Greenville, South Carolina, and that is where I met my husband. But during that time, I wasn't real sure what the Lord had in store for me, but I knew that I wanted some training to do something for the Lord, and so I went to Holmes. And I sat in the same classes that the ministerial students sat in, under the same teachers. I learned the same things that they did. We studied Old and New Testament, we studied Greek and evangelism and apologetics and homiletics and all that stuff, but never, not one time ever, did I consider myself to be a preacher. But for some reason, over these last many years, I have received into my head and into my heart some messages, lessons, sermons, I guess you could call them, because they all have a title, and they all have a scripture verse, and they all have 3 points, which we know every good sermon does. But my problem has always been, what am I supposed to do with them? I seriously did consider writing a book and calling the book Sermons I Cannot Preach, because I'm not a preacher. So when some months back, Mom and I were talking, and we were discussing things that the women's ministry and the 50-plus group were doing, and I say we were discussing, usually Jesse will walk in the room and I'm like this, and he'll say, "You talking to your mom?" Because usually I'm listening. I love you, Mom. So we were talking about these things, and she mentioned the 50-plus group was going to the Billy Graham Library, and if you miss that trip, you miss something great. It is a wonderful place to go. And then she mentioned having a special day here, a special Sunday with a speaker. And I said, well, if you don't have a speaker yet, I happen to have one of those. Something pertaining to the later years of life. I'm not going to use the O word. So that's how I ended up here today. I actually volunteered. Now, I've never been in the military. My husband was for 30 years. But I know that volunteering is a big thing in the military. I volunteered for this today. Talking about getting older always brings to mind some stories. And by stories, I mean, the funny stories that we tell about older people. I love the readings that were done here today. That was really good. One of my favorite stories is about 2 ladies that had grown up together, knew each other all their lives, from early in school, grew up, married, had families. Their families were friends, and they had gotten up into their older ages, maybe in the 80s, we'll say. And they were together one day. And one of them said to the other one, "Dearie," that's my old lady voice, she said, "I know we've known each other a long time, and I know that we've grown up together, and we've known each other for years. And I don't want to hurt your feelings, I don't want to make you mad, but could you remind me what your name is?" And the other one looked at her a minute, and she said, "How soon do you need to know?" That's one of my stories. And a friend of mine sent me a text, and it's a cartoon. 2 ladies are in a restaurant having lunch, and one of them says to the other one, "Look at those 2 old ladies that are sitting over there. That's going to be us in about 10 years. And the friend says, "That's a mirror." And so I texted my friend back, and I told her, "Thank you for giving me my illustration for my talk today, because the title of this one is The Old Woman in My Mirror." There is an old woman in my mirror. I hate to tell you that. And I tell you what, she's getting on my nerves. Now, some of you may remember that young 20-year-old that left here to go to Holmes all those many years ago. It was 1972. I was a little girl back then. I didn't weigh but about 100 pounds, 110 pounds or something like that. That really was a long time ago. And I had dark brown hair, but it didn't come out of a bottle back then. It was God-given back then. But I really was ready and willing to do whatever it was the Lord wanted me to do. And back then, and through subsequent years, people used to always tell me that I looked younger than what my real age was. Now, when you're 17 and look 12, that's annoying. But when you get into the older years and people start telling you, oh, you can't possibly be that old, whatever age it is, or you can't possibly have children, whatever age they are, it feels good. It really feels good. But can I tell you something? I'm hearing it less and less. Sorry to say, hearing it less and less. I remember the first time I was eligible for the senior discount at the store. Remember that day? I think it was 55. I think that's about the youngest you get it. And I was in line and I was getting ready to pay for my stuff, and I said to the girl, oh, I think I might be eligible for your discount. Well, I was reaching for my wallet because I knew very well she wasn't going to believe I was that old and was going to make me prove it. And you know what she said to me? Oh, I've already given it to you. No. I was so upset then I didn't even want the discount. But as I look in my mirror today, and I see that old woman looking back at me, and I'll go like this, and she goes like this, and I go like that, I know that young girl's in there somewhere. She's got to be. She can't possibly have totally disappeared. But I don't see her anymore. I feel her. Don't really feel that much different on the inside. But things change on the outside, don't they? And they look different. And I'm reminded, this is the Bible verse, of a woman in the Bible who, when she looked in her mirror in her older age, and she looked back at the young woman, and the young girl and young woman, and had been growing older as she did. If you turn to Hebrews 11, verse 11, Hebrews 11 is called the faith chapter. Now we're going to see in this woman's life some of the things that she didn't really look like she was doing them out of faith. But she did have faith. Even through all the things that she went through, she still had faith that God's promise was going to be fulfilled. She sometimes had a little different notion of how it might come to be. It says, through faith also Sara herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now, ladies, I know your heartbeats are speeding up. Not for a minute do I think this is going to happen to anybody in here, okay? That's not what I'm saying. It happened to Sara. It was a different kind of situation. When she looked in her mirror, she might have seen the young girl, the young wife of Abraham, or back then he was called Abram, as God told him to leave their home up in the north, in the Chaldees, and to start traveling south. And God didn't tell them where they were going. He just said, to a land that I will show you. And by faith, Abraham packed up his family, his servants, his animals, everything, and Sarah came along with him, and they started out. She might have seen that young woman. Or she might have seen a woman as she was getting a little older, going through the childbearing years, not having a child, even though God had promised that they would have descendants. Not only one or two, but that would number to the stars of the skies and the sands of the seashore. That was God's promise to them. But you know, the older you get, and the more time passes, the more you think, well, maybe it's just not going to happen. And then on past her childbearing years, in her 70s. I mean, it's over by then, right? Nothing's going to happen then. So she decided to take things into her own hands. And she made a plan. She actually had her husband marry another woman who was a servant girl of hers, so they could have a child, and then that child would sort of be a proxy child for Sara. Well, that did happen, but as anybody could tell you, when somebody first tells you that story, some woman's going to have her husband, take another woman. That's not going to end well. And it didn't, because immediately Sara got jealous of Hagar, the young servant girl, made her leave. God spoke to Hagar and sent her back, and she did have a child with Abraham. They named him Ishmael. And when Ishmael was 13 years old is when we come to the story today. Sara was 90 years old. And God sent a messenger to Abraham to tell him, now's the time. The time has come for this promise to be fulfilled. And Sara heard the messenger tell Abraham, now Sarah's going to, now at 90 years old, she is going to have a child. This child is going to be Isaac. This is going to be the one that I promised many, many years ago. Well, when Sarah heard that, she laughed. Do you ever wonder why she laughed? It was funny. I mean, it was very funny to think of having. Even Abraham laughed. It said that Abraham himself laughed when that happened, when he heard that message. And Sarah laughed because, you know, it is funny to think of having, it's tragic in some ways, but it's funny to think of having a child when you're already 90 years old. And look at what the scripture says about Abraham. This doesn't really have anything to do with today's lesson, but it's so funny. There are some funny lines in the Bible that just make me laugh out loud. Verse 12 says, "Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable." Him who as good as dead, that's God talking about Abraham. You're really old when even God calls you as good as dead. But it happened. And they had this child. Now there are 3 lessons. Here's my 3 points. There are 3 lessons that I think we can learn from this story about Sara today. Number 1 is, I don't think it's too unusual as we get older into our later years. I don't think it's too unusual to look back and actually find that we have some regrets about some things that have happened. Our brother in the Sunday school lesson this morning talked about, the topic was the tongue and taming the tongue, and how words that we speak can really be hurtful. But he said once they're out there, once you say them, you can't take them back. And lots of times we do regret things that we've said. And I think as we look back over our lives, there may be some regrets. And just as Sarah had regrets about the plan that she had hatched with Abraham and Hagar. But we can't let those regrets define us. And we can't let them be us. We have to accept God's forgiveness for the things that we've done, whether it's advertent or inadvertent, whether it's mistaken or whether we did them on purpose. We have to get forgiveness, and then we have to be able to move on. Because in our later years, and you know what, there are some people, and you may know some, who actually tried to live in the past. I think it was the pastor said something about looking at things in the rearview mirror. You know, you don't look too much in the rearview mirror. You just glance at it once in a while. You keep your eyes on the road most of the time, we hope, because that's the way we're going. So if we kept our eyes looking forward the way we're going and only glance once in a while at the ones in the rearview mirror, we know they're there and we're sorry for them, and we may have those regrets, but we can't just wallow in them, and we can't let that define us as we are now. So that's one thing. Another thing I think we can learn is that all the wonderful, good, terrific, marvelous things that are going to happen in our lives are not going to happen in our youth. They're going to be spread out a little bit throughout life. So even at the age of 50 plus or 60 plus or even on up, we're going to have some good things. We're not only going to have some good things happen to us, but we're going to be able to do some good things as well. And I think that's something to remember. Did you know Colonel Sanders didn't start KFC until he was 65? Did you know that? He was getting on up in age. But he didn't stop, and aren't we glad he didn't? Grandma Moses began painting as an artist at the age of 76. And she painted until she was 101. I don't know if that means she died at 101 or she just stopped painting when she was 101. But that's getting on up there. And the reason she started painting, I read in a source I was reading, she was an embroiderer. She liked to do embroidery, but her arthritis got so bad she couldn't do the fine motor stuff, so she picked up a paintbrush. She didn't let it stop her. She had that art in her, and it had to come out somehow, so then it started coming out on canvas. She didn't say, "I'm too old." Laura Ingalls Wilder published the first Little House on the Prairie book when she was 65. I was not aware of that. And you know, that was a series, so there were many of those to come after that. Benjamin Franklin was 70. He was involved in drafting the Declaration of Independence, and at 81, he signed the Constitution of the United States. He stayed involved. And my nephew Scott's favorite person in the world, Ronald Reagan, he was 61 when he became governor of California, and 69 he became president of the United States. And he served for 2 terms. He didn't stop. He went on to that goal. So let me repeat all of the wonderful, terrific, marvelous things that you're going to do or that are going to happen to you are not necessarily all going to happen in our youth. And the third thing I think we can learn, it's never too late for a fresh start. Never too late to do something new and different. Never too late. Someone asked me several months ago, when was I going to retire? And I said, well, first thing I said was, I'm not going to retire yet. There's life in the old girl yet. And then I said, I'll retire when you retire. That person's about 10 years younger than me, so he said, you'll never retire. I said, well, I kind of thought that anyway. But it's never too late because, you know, if you look at Sara having a child at 90 years old, she reinvented herself. She had a whole completely new and different life after that. It's never too late to do things like, I think, going back to school. I got my last nursing degree when I was 51 years old. My friend got hers in her 60s, and she went on to become a manager of a dialysis clinic and do great things with her RN license. It's never too late to do those things. Now, that doesn't mean it's not harder, because it will be harder as you get older. But hard and impossible are not synonyms. Hard is not the same as impossible. So if there's something that you've been wanting to learn, if you're a big history buff or something like that, you've been wanting to go back and learn. My son's back in school. He's only in his 30s. It doesn't get easier, but he's doing a great job. But if there's something, even in older years, that you want to do, I encourage people to study, learn, keeps your brain active. It's never too late to travel. I mentioned earlier Ronald Reagan, how much Scott loves him. Jesse and I, we lived in California for 2 years, but we didn't get to the Reagan Library when we lived out there. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we went back out to California on a vacation, and we went to the Reagan Library. It's in Simi Valley up north of Los Angeles. It's up on the top of a beautiful mountain, and those long-range views that you see from up there, his grave, of course, is there. And it's just gorgeous. So if you want somewhere to start, go to the Reagan Library. Go to the Billy Graham Library in Charlotte, and then go to the Reagan Library. It's wonderful. And if you need somebody to travel with, call me. It's never too late to fall in love. Now, I don't necessarily mean that in the romantic way, although I don't think it's ever too late to do that either. But it's not too late to develop a passion for something that you want to do. It's not too late to become passionate about something. Whether it's working in the church, volunteering with a community group or something. And I know I'm looking at and I'm talking to some of the most active, hardest working 50-plus people that I know, because I worked alongside you making apple butter since 2004. I know how hard you work. So I'm not trying to talk you into something today. All I need to do, I think, is encourage you to keep on doing what you're doing and to do it as unto the Lord. And if there is someone here that doesn't come and make apple butter, now's a good time. 2 more months, we'll be doing it again. Now's a good time. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't say this. It's never too late to start living for the Lord. So if there is anybody here today, I know most of you here today, but if there's anybody here that doesn't know the Lord as their Savior, that hasn't started that journey that some of us have been on for 50 plus years, today, you couldn't find a better day than today to give your heart and life to the Lord, or to rededicate yourself to the Lord if you are a Christian. I have another story that I want to tell you. This one's not funny. This one makes me cry. When Jesse and I started our pastoring days, he took a little church in Newberry, South Carolina, and I had worked as a nurse's aide. I knew someday I would be a nurse, but I hadn't yet gone to nursing school, so I wanted to get into the medical field as much as I could. So I was a nurse's aide for a year. And then we moved back to the East Coast from Washington State, and he took a church in Newberry, South Carolina. And I couldn't really work as a nurse's aide because that would mean working on weekends. And as the pastor's wife, I felt like I really needed to be with him. So I went to the local nursing home, and I told them all of that, what I just told you. And they made up a job for me. I was so proud. They called me a floating aide, which means I did a little bit of everything. I did inventory, I did clerical, I put my scrubs on once in a while and did the nurse's aide thing. But one of my favorite things that I did, and I don't think I've ever told Jonathan this, but he's an activities director now, But back then, one of the things I did was I assisted the activities director. So, you know, when the folks would come out to the cafeteria or wherever, and we would do crafts and things like that. But another thing that I did, and I loved it, they would have me go to the residents' rooms, the ones who were bedridden and couldn't come out, and I would spend time with them, mostly reading the Bible. And there was one little lady that just loved for me to come and read to her from the Bible. She was completely bedridden, could not get out of the bed. And her mental faculties also had diminished considerably. Every time I went to her room, I had to introduce myself again. She couldn't remember my name. That was okay. One day I was sitting in there and I was reading to her. And the social worker popped her head in the door to check on her. And I stopped reading for a minute and we chatted a little bit. And so the social worker was going to do some reality orientation as they tend to do. So she asked the resident, "Who is this?" Pointing to me, "Who is this?" Well, I knew she didn't know my name. But I can see, it's been almost 40 years, and I can see that little head as it slowly moves and looks at that social worker. And she said, "She's a girl that God sent." And don't you know, that meant more to me. And if she knew my name and address and phone number and favorite color, a girl that God sent. And it's been a long time since the term girl applied to me, but I tell you what, that has been my goalpost. That has been my target. To be and to act like that I am the one that God has sent. I didn't have children at that time. When my children started coming along, I've hoped and prayed that I've been the mother that God sent to them. Now, my son might tell you some stories that might sound like maybe I wasn't, but I think they've turned out well, and I thank God every day for them. When I became a nurse, I want even now to be the nurse that God sends to my patients. I do hold their hands. I do pray with them. I do cry with them and with their families on occasion. I want to be the one that God has sent to them. It's never too late to consider yourself, because we know that God has sent us. But it's never too late to consider now, am I the one that God sent today to this one? Whether it's at work, whether it's at home, in the store, wherever it is that you go, there's somebody that you can be the God sent one for them. And I think that we should have that as our goal, as our target. If you'll stand, our sister's going to lead us in Precious Memories. It's on page 93 in the church hymnal, and she's going to lead us, and then I'll ask the pastor to come and close the service as you will.